Hello and welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Lyndall Curtis. The federal government has begun the work to find out the detailed shape of the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse announced late yesterday by the Prime Minister. There's been widespread support for the inquiry. The most senior Catholic in Australia, Cardinal George Pell, has said the Church will fully cooperate. On the other side of the country, Hillary Clinton, the US Secretary of State, has arrived in Perth for the annual Australia-US ministerial talks, and it may be her last trip to Australia in that role. Joining me to discuss the day's events are Liberal MP Alan Tudge and Labor MP Stephen Jones. Welcome to you both.
Good to be with you.
We'll start first with the Royal Commission, and talks have begun with the states and victims groups to determine the terms of reference for the Commission.
We'll work to get the terms of reference right. Then the Royal Commission itself will be constituted, and we will take continuing advice from them about what is necessary in terms of time to get this done and get it right. I think it's not the right approach to say, let's do it quickly and not do it thoroughly.
This is a step towards healing, an important step towards healing. We support it, we encourage it. I know that the current leadership of the Church is determined to get to the bottom of this.
The pursuit of justice is an absolute entitlement for everyone. That being said, to what extent are wounds simply opened by the rerunning of events which have been reported not only once but many times previously? I certainly very much regret the general smearing, I might say. The Church is covering up. The Church has done nothing. Because that's not the case.
We'll come to Cardinal Pell's comments in a moment, but first, Alan, the Prime Minister's not putting a time frame on the Commission. She says how long the Royal Commission takes will be up to the Commissioners. Is that the right way to do it, to give it the time it deserves?
I think it probably is, Lyndall. It's a huge inquiry, really, that is going to cover not just the churches but non-government organisations and government authorities, and it's potentially going to look at cases going back many decades. And so I think it is right to appoint the commissioners and get advice from them first before finalising the length of time.
Stephen, will the challenge be in making sure it's not too unwieldy, in making sure the scope of the Commission and how the Commission deals with each element is done properly?
Look, I think that's absolutely right. Getting the terms of reference right is critical. But we have seen in other countries where Royal Commissions of this nature have been set up. They have gone for many years and they've strayed into areas that people didn't think they would in the first place, but you know, were necessary for the conduct of the investigation.
I'll ask both of you, first to you, Alan. The Commission will happen. Will the determination of its success in the end be whether or not its recommendations, when they finally happen, are taken up by government?
Well, it won't just be government, Lyndall. It'll be government, churches, state authorities and other institutions. I think the success will be broader than that, though. The process in itself will hopefully be a healing process for many victims, and will also bring a sense of justice to many victims. And of course it will hopefully lead to institutional change where change has not already occurred.
And Stephen, the same question to you, the determination of its success. Do you agree with Alan? It will be much broader than what comes out at the end of it, the actual holding of the Commission, the allowing people to air their stories and being seen to be heard. That be important too?
Yeah, look, I do. And can I just make one comment on the healing stuff? And maybe I differ slightly from Tony Abbott, maybe Alan, I don't know, but certainly Archbishop Pell. You can't get to the healing unless there's an acknowledgement. And if you sit down and talk to many of the victims, one of the things that destroys them and destroys lives is that for decades nobody believed them. And when they could eventually get somebody to believe them, they couldn't get access to the proper processes because there were cover-ups. We cannot sweep that aside. People want to have that acknowledged so that they can move on. And yeah, we can put in place the right sort of recommendations to ensure that these sorts of things never happen again.
Cardinal Pell said today that the Church would fully cooperate with the Commission, that he believes the Church has put in place good practices to deal with these instances. What do you make, though, of his comments that his accusation that the media has been exaggerating the problem in the Catholic Church?
Look, it's not up for me to give, Cardinal Pell media advice, but I thought the comments were, perhaps a little bit unfortunate. People don't want to hear leaders of any church, not just the Catholic Church, saying, well, you're exaggerating, or we're not as bad as that mob over there. What they want to see is people saying, as he did say, we will cooperate. We acknowledge things that have gone on are despicable. There'll be no cover-ups, and let justice fall where it does.
I think that's right. I don't think this issue can be exaggerated, to be honest. If just one person had been abused, then that would be one child too many, but we know that it's many more than that. It's one of the most vile and evil things that occurs in our society is child abuse, and we must get to the bottom of it to give some sense of justice for those victims and also to change the institutional processes where necessary.
Can I make this point, Lyndall? I don't think the churches themselves can move on without this happening, because they will continually have the monkey on their back, and whenever each week goes past or each month goes past and another incident from the past is brought to the fore, allegations are made, people will naturally say the cover-up is still continuing, or the incidences are still continuing. And look, many of the church leaders that I talk to say these things are all in the past. I think that misses the point. The victims want justice. The victims want recognition.
We might move on now to the AUSMIN talks. The US Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defence are in Australia, in Perth. The talks will no doubt discuss Afghanistan, but they'll also discuss the likely increased presence of US military aircraft and eventually an increased US maritime presence in Australia. Alan Tudge, do you think, given we've already had Marines in the top end and that process will continue, that Australians accept the increased US presence?
I think Australians do accept the increased US presence, and I think it would be a good thing if we again forge even deeper relationships with the United States from a security perspective. We already have very deep relationships from an intelligence perspective, and any enhanced relationship in terms of defence sharing of arrangements can only be a good thing for our nation.
Stephen, the increased US presence will be ramped up fairly slowly. We won't reach 2,500 Marines coming to Australia until I think 2016, and the ministers saying that, the defence ministers saying that the increased maritime presence, naval presence, possibly at HMAS Sterling in WA, may take some years. Is that the right approach to stage this over a very long period of time?
Look, I think it is on a whole heap of levels, operational levels, but even a political level in bringing the country along with us. But I will make this point. Many on the left of centre side of politics are critical of the US alliance. I'm not one of them. In fact, I welcome the speech that President Obama gave in our Parliament last year, where he said if they've dropped the ball on this part of the world over the last couple of decades, they're going to correct that. For too long, perhaps, they've been bogged down in the Middle East, where the main game, the growth, the political action is in this part of the world, and we should welcome the fact that the US is now turning its sights in this part of the world and strengthening our alliance with them as a consequence. One
change which we may well see sooner is a new Secretary of State and possibly a new Secretary of Defence as well. Stephen, do the personal relationships in a country-to-country relationship as strong as the US-Australian one matter all that much?
Look, of course the personal relationships matter, but the country-to-country relationships, which are based not only on interests but shared values, persist and prevail through all of that. When personalities come and go, parties come and go, prime ministers, presidents come and go, but the country-to-country relationship persists through all of that. So it may make a difference, but not over the long term.
And Alan, would you expect much change in the way business is done with different people in the Secretary of State and Defence roles if that happens?
No, I wouldn't. I agree with Stephen on that front, that our nations have been very close and have been allies for a very long time with multiple different people from different parties, and we will continue to have that close relationship regardless of who takes over the Secretary of State position or the Defence Secretary position. But just picking up on Stephen's point as well, that he is also in favour of the US alliance, I think that's a terrific development, because unfortunately in the Labor Party in past years we've had some very senior people, including the leader of the Parliamentary Labor Party, who hasn't been quite as forthright in praise of the United States alliance.
We set it up, Alan. Let's not forget that, mate.
We might move on. We might just move on to a couple of other issues. Stephen, there's New South Wales investigation into allegations that associates of the former Labor Minister Eddie Obeid profited from decisions made by another minister, Ian MacDonald, a scheme described by the council assisting the inquiry as one that could represent corruption unexceeded since the days of the Rum Corps. This doesn't help, does it, with rebuilding Labor's stocks in New South Wales, particularly in Western Sydney, where you need to not only hold but win back seats?
Look, I'm appalled by the allegations, the things that have been aired. I think if people have behaved like scumbags, then they deserve to have the full force of the law thrown on them. They do not deserve to wear the letters ALP alongside their name, and I welcome the fact that the leader of the state party, John Robinson, has moved quickly to have them suspended. If these allegations are proved true, then we should go a lot further than that.
There was a suggestion in one of the papers, I think the Sydney Morning Herald this morning, that while your opinion poll stocks may have improved, you're not getting the support you need in Western Sydney. Do you think that's true?
Look, you can't deny the fact that when things like this go on, it's not helpful. And that's why I'm so angry about the behaviour that seems to have been going on in the last days of the Labor New South Wales government. If these are proved to be true, then no condemnation is strong enough for the people, the characters that are involved.
And Alan, on a separate issue, Tony Abbott, the opposition leader, has described Liberal MP Ken Wyatt as an urban Aboriginal and said of Northern Territory CLP MLA Alison Anderson, who he's keen to see make the jump to federal politics, that she would be an authentic representative of the ancient cultures of Central Australia. Do you know the distinction he was trying to draw, or what he means by making reference to Ken Wyatt as an urban Aboriginal?
I think what he was trying to say was that it would be terrific to have somebody from remote Australia who is also in the federal parliament. So the Liberal Party's got a proud record in having Indigenous members in our parliament, both with Neville Bonner being the first person and Ken Wyatt being the second. And I think he was suggesting that if it was somebody from the outback who became a member of parliament, that would also be a terrific thing for our nation.
And finally, one final question. Stephen Jones, you've recently had a trip to Myanmar. Do you think that's a country that is making the sort of progress it needs to make?
Look, there is genuine political reform going on in Myanmar. The leadership of the country are committed to it. They've got a long way to go. We were there on a private delegation looking at the rollout of vaccines by Gavi, a fantastic organisation that the federal government is very proud to be supporting. And when you go to countries like that and you see where our foreign aid is going to work, literally saving hundreds of thousands of lives, you feel very proud about what we're doing as a country.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. Stephen Jones and Alan Tudge, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Lyndall. Thanks, Stephen.
And thank you for joining Capitol Hill. Please be with us at the same time tomorrow. Good night.